I'm still keeping an eye on the war in Ethiopia. Why am I keeping more of an eye on the war in Ethiopia than I am keeping an eye on the war in Armenia? Well, there are two reasons for that. Because I don't care about the war in Ethiopia any more than I care about the war in Armenia. But for two reasons. I keep a closer eye on the war in Ethiopia. And one of those reasons is this. The war in Armenia is finished. But there's another reason, and it's a really good reason. And that other reason is because the person with whom I chat about things, and I mean all sorts of things, the most in the world, is very into Ethiopia. She's part of the community. So, I happen to talk to this person a lot. This person cares about Ethiopia. Therefore, I find out a lot about Ethiopia as a consequence of that. It's nothing to do with whether I care about Ethiopia. If she happened to be interested in Armenia, I'd be finding out a hell of a lot about Armenia. I've done many podcasts and YouTube episodes that relate to Ethiopia over the last few years, but that's not a function of any interest I've got in Ethiopia. It's a function of the interest my correspondent, my chat partner has in Ethiopia, because she's interested in Ethiopia and she's willing to chat to me a lot, and other people aren't willing to chat to me a lot, then I'm often talking and thinking about Ethiopia. So that's that. If she stopped chatting to me today, she's a bit busy at the moment actually, because Ethiopia is in the middle of a war. So normally we chat, we've been chatting for years, but she's chatting to me less at the moment because she's really distracted and busy because she's in the middle of a war. And she is a player in the war. She's doing something. She's playing a part in the war. Good and good on her for that. But at the moment, like if she got completely consumed by that war and all that sort of thing, and even went over to Ethiopia and just ignored me for the next 6 months, and I struck up a chat, because I always need someone to chat to. I prefer to chat to her. She's a really excellent chat partner for me. She chats in a way that I like to chat. We're very compatible. We're very different in terms of what we believe and all that sort of thing, but we have this wonderful way of being able to be different and being able to chat about that. Like she's pro-Trump, and I'm anti-Trump, for example, but it really doesn't matter. In fact, that adds spice to our chats, because it's the opposite of being in an echo chamber. So I love talking to her. She's my favourite chat partner in the world, actually. But at the moment, she's been consumed by a war, and she's doing some really good things for her side in that war. I'm not on either of the sides in that war because I'm not part of the community. I don't know enough about Ethiopia to take a side even. I dare say, look, she's in one of the communities in Ethiopia. There's two communities that are warring with each other. I don't want to, I'm just simplifying it. She's in one community. If she happened to be, if years ago she had have joined the other community, I'd be all for the other community, I suspect. Well, I'm not for it, but I'd be hearing a lot more about the other side of the war. But because she's in this side of the war, I'm hearing a lot about this side of the war. All right, so that's that. So, by accident and education, she educates me about what's going on in Ethiopia. And she's been doing that for years, and I found out an awful lot. Stuff I would never have found out about. It's amazing. And it's an amazing culture, actually. But then again, I reiterate, no matter, if, for example, for the last 5 years, I had been heavily chatting with someone about wherever, Uganda, Iceland, anywhere really, New Zealand even, I would find that those cultures are equally fascinating in different ways, but Ethiopia is as fascinating as every other culture in the world. It's right up there with every single other culture in the world. Ethiopia is amazing. I never knew how amazing. It's as amazing as every other culture in the world. So, but I'm keeping an eye on that war, only because I know she's involved and she chats to me a lot, And my take on the war as it stands at the moment, look, it's complicated as are most wars. Most wars seem to me to be, and I didn't make this up, other people have observed it, are trade wars, at one level or another. This one, to me, it's a bit tribal, but it's tribal elite, as far as I can tell. As far as I can tell, there are complications, cultural, all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's always complicated stuff going on, So I've been listening closely to all the ins and outs and factors involved with this war for ages. Excuse me. Had to cough. And it's taken me years to learn 2% of what's going on. My goddaughter, because that is my chat partner, my goddaughter is really intimate with all the little factors and all that sort of stuff, all the factors at play. But I know 2%, and I've been listening very closely and getting quite obsessed with Ethiopia for years, and I know 2%, which is a hell of a lot more than a lot of people know. But my take on the current war at the moment is that the major factor seems to be as follows, and I could be wrong. The major factor at play seems to be as follows. There is what's called an Amharan elite, and there is what's called a Tigrayan elite. Okay, so these are the elite level of two different tribes, if you like. Okay. Now there are other tribes, so there'd be an Oromo elite and all that sort of stuff. In fact, I think one of the belligerents in the current war is at least half Oromo. All right, so there's a Tigrayan elite, essentially. It's not that clean, and there's an Amharan / Oromo elite on the other side. And there's an Eritrean elite too, but I don't want to complicate it too much. But the bottom line is there seems to be two elites. And it seems to me that ever since the last emperor of Ethiopia was knocked off and the royalty of Ethiopia, the ancient royalty of Ethiopia, was terminated, since then, these two elites, now that elite is a mixture of different elites, different tribes. This one seems to be fairly mono-tribal, Tigrayan. All right, it seems to me that elite cannot power share with that elite. Power sharing is impossible. That's as far as I could tell, and I could be wrong, and I'm not trying to educate anyone here. If you really want to know what's going on, get over to my goddaughter's YouTube clips or whatever she does. She's on social media, so Instagram and Facebook and all those, also Twitter and all that sort of stuff. She talks on those sorts of things. I just do YouTube and podcasts, because I like it's one way. I never have to talk to anyone else. I'm just talking to myself. And no views. I'm going for no views. She gets something like 10,000 views or something. I don't know what, maybe 20,000 views and 40,000 shares and 50,000 likes and 60,000 comments. My objective is no views. I'm talking to myself. I'm not. If you're listening to this, I am not interested in you listening to this. I don't want you listening to this. I use this to think my own way through these things. I'm talking to myself. Now, my take, and it could be wrong, is that there is one elite over there, and that elite was instrumental in overthrowing another elite. All right, there's two elites. Now, as far as I can tell, let me think about this. I don't want to get into it too much, but is it true that there was the last emperor of Ethiopia was knocked off? Haile Selassie, Rastus, very famous. He was knocked off. I know that much. In his place came, an elite. Now that elite was called the Derg. I don't know if they came in exactly at that moment, or they came in a minute later, or days later, or weeks later, or months later. But when the royal house disappeared, when Haile Selassie, when the 3,000-year royal line was smashed up, and that was the end of the royal house of Ethiopia or whatever, the Solomonic dynasty was wiped out. In its place, one of these elites took control, or an elite, and it wasn't the Tigrayan elite. It was another elite, which they call the Derg. Maybe it was a bit Amharan, was it? I don't want to get into too much. I kind of think it as Tigrayan and another elite, which is a bit of a mixture of tribes. I don't want to get too specific about it. All right. So one elite became very powerful and dominant. Okay. And for reasons that probably go back into the royal era, they didn't like this mob over here, the Tigrayans, for some reason. Okay. And this Derg, this elite over here, I'll call it an Amharan / other elite over here, were quite brutal, as far as I can tell. Now, they're by 1975 or something. This mob over here, the Tigrayan elite, now it was well recognised that this mob was horrible, killing lots of people and all that sort of stuff. Real, absolute, like the worst kind of Marxist, Leninist, sort of communist tyranny you can imagine. Shocking things happened from this mob. Now this mob over here, there was an elite over here, this elite knocked that elite off. There was a big war and all that sort of stuff. Very brave. This mob knocked that mob off. And I think this mob tried to put in a power sharing arrangement where it wasn't just themselves, but it was a coalition where all the elites would power share. But here's the thing, as far as I can tell, and I could be wrong, remember the Derg before this moment, the Derg, no, that was just my battery getting low. The Derg over this side, I don't think they were into power sharing. They were just into smashing that elite. Right, this elite comes into play, and I think it was proposing, and there was a guy called Malice, who was a very great leader and all that sort of stuff, tried to get a power sharing arrangement in place. But I think still, in that era, which might have been 20 years or something, the post-Derg era, I think the Tigrayan elite was still heavily dominant from everything I've heard. It was almost a coalition in name, but the Tigrayans were quite dominant in the coalition. All right, so after the empire, I should have called it the empire instead of the royal houses. You had the Derg, where one mob was in